President Trump is escalating his feud with Harvard. This morning, he threatened to redistribute $3 billion in grant money from the Ivy League school to trade schools. It comes after a federal judge last week halted the administration plans to bar the university from enrolling international students. CBS News legal contributor Jessica Levinson joins me now. Jessica, good to see you. First, it's not clear how the president would shift the money or if the grants come from the funding that his administration has already frozen. But that said, can the president redistribute money that's already been allocated for Harvard?
Well, I think that said is a big deal here. So let's assume that this is money that the president has the discretion to basically give and take. I think once we have determined, if we've determined that this is money that was earmarked for Harvard, then we have some serious problems about shifting it from pot A to pot B. And you need to be able to do so, you need to make sure you do so in a legal manner, in the sense that you have to make sure you're not violating Harvard's First Amendment rights. You can't shift that money based on not liking their expression. You have to make sure that you give Harvard due process, that they had notice, they had an opportunity to be heard. You have to make sure that you're not violating something called the spending clause, essentially that you would be giving an unconstitutional strings attached on that money. So I would say it's not as easy as saying, Harvard, I don't like what you're doing, so we're going to shift this money over here.
Quick clarification, when you say earmarked, does the legal dubiousness start if that earmarking comes from Congress, or does it not matter?
You zeroed in on exactly where it was a little general. So I would say the first question has to be, is this something that the president has the power to shift around at all? Or do we really need to look to Congress? Meaning we know that Congress has the power of the purse. This is why your question is really important. And so is there actually, I know we've talked about this before, but an Impoundment Act question where if you want to change this funding, you have to go back to Congress. Let's assume that the president actually does have the power as head of the executive branch to spend the money. Then we go down all those considerations that we just talked about.
So Harvard has two suits already filed against the administration. One is for stripping $2.2 billion in funding. Another is against that ban from the university enrolling foreign students, which on Friday a federal judge temporarily blocked. What comes next in this legal fight?
What comes next is a fuller exploration of many of the issues we just talked about when it came to the funding. I know it's going to sound to people like, wait, she just said this, but we're looking at some of the same issues. So we know that a judge put that on hold, meaning that the Trump administration's desire to strip certification from Harvard, the certification that allows them to have international students, judge put that on hold. What comes next is now we're going to have a fuller airing of the legality of all these issues through the lens of what we just talked about. The First Amendment. Is the Trump administration targeting Harvard based on their expression? What we just talked about, due process. Did the Trump administration go about this the right way? Are there any Administrative Procedures Act issues? So all of those issues are going to play out now in a courtroom.
I do want to shift gears. Boeing reached a deal to avoid prosecution from the Justice Department over the deadly MAX jetliner crashes. It will be required to invest money in improving the aviation giant's compliance safety quality program. It also has to set aside more than $400 million for the families of the victims killed. What are your early takeaways?
My early takeaway is that this is really the new frontier of corporate accountability, and that in terms of whether or not this deal pans out well, we know that we've had issues with compliance in an earlier iteration of a deal that Boeing tried to reach with the Department of Justice. I think that we all have to look at the level of oversight that's given to make sure that Boeing does, in fact, follow through with the promises. We know that the victims' families have been somewhat unhappy with at least earlier versions of this plan. So my initial takeaway is that this tells us a lot about where we are in terms of corporate accountability. And Boeing obviously really wanted to avoid the possibility that they would be branded a convicted felon.
Jessica Levinson, thank you so much.